Welcome to the Follow the Leaders podcast, where we get a glimpse into the minds and lives of exceptional leaders and hear about their experiences, insights, and strategies for success. On today's episode, we'll hear from one heart-centered, effective leader and hear about their wisdom and perspective. So get ready to follow along. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Gale, and today I am so thrilled to have Betsy Delzer join me for this episode. Betsy Delzer is a leadership coach and culture change consultant with 22 years of experience in public education. First as a teacher and then as a coach and coordinator, Betsy focuses coaching and skill training on mindfulness-based strategies for building emotional intelligence. Betsy grew up overseas in Singapore and London, and her journey into leadership has been a fascinating and winding road. Betsy is the owner of By Firelight, The Collection, and is the founder of Rise for the Greater Good, a culture coaching consulting group. Betsy is a yoga instructor and mindfulness educator and is working towards her master's in educational leadership. Betsy is a national and international speaker on topics surrounding mindful leadership. Welcome to the podcast, Betsy.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here.
Our paths have overlapped professionally in so many ways over the years, so I am super excited to be here today to focus our convo on the leadership topic. Let's start with your work life. Can you give listeners a picture of what that looks like, both for your educational leadership life and your culture coaching leadership work?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so first of all, Jamie, thank you so much. This is a super treat to be here. I'm really honored and just excited for this time. So I have spent a lot of years in one school system. And the really unique part of that is that my work is very multifaceted and has changed so many times. So I started in my career in the art room, which was our first crossover, actually, because I had your children as my students, and they still have a deep impression on my heart.
Oh.
So that time was phenomenal for a lot of reasons. I think I have sort of a spirit of eternal youth, and that really was allowed to flourish in the space of creating with kids. Along that road, I became a mom and I became a yogi. And when I was practicing yoga, I just wanted to deepen my practice and learn how to teach it, because I knew that teaching and being with people in that capacity was like my niche. And so I decided to do a yoga teacher training, and that really took my life in a super different trajectory, pathway, all the things. And a lot of people asked me when I was doing the teacher training, like, are you planning a career change? And it's fascinating to have stayed in one system and have had so many different opportunities within that system. Because after I left the classroom, I mean, I have a very distinct memory of sort of like shutting off the lights and taking the smocks off the hook for the last time. And of course, it was like somewhat ritualistic. And I walked out and I was like, I have no idea what's ahead of me. Like, I have no idea where I'm headed. But I was transitioning into a role that was really a caregiving role for staff. And the concept was, if we can take care of teachers and really allow them to touch the reason that they came into the profession in the first place on the regular, that they would then be grounded and coming from a place of abundance versus scarcity in their teaching. Mm-hmm. And so my work was really around coaching cycles. It was mindfulness-based strategies for essentially, so we'll use a couple terms that I think it probably would be helpful to peel apart and define for people, but social emotional learning or emotional intelligence, right? And so if you think of it this way, those things are the same thing, essentially, in my world, I would say, in my humble definition. And the emotional intelligence aspect is like the life skills you need to converse, relate, connect to other people. And in the school system, oftentimes we think of the academic structures and even the encore specializations. And where I started to flow was this like whole child, the whole person, the whole teacher, the whole leader. And I started one of my coaching cycles with our then superintendent, and that whole thing, experiencing coaching a leader, he was like, okay, we finished our coaching cycle. And he's like, let's keep meeting. And that is what got me into leadership development, honestly, because it was kind of like, I want this leader to experience this, and I want you to do this for this leader. And so I just started kind of charting my own path there in this realm. And so fast forward, then I have been in this coaching and coordinating world for about 6 to 7 years. And through that, in 2020, when the pandemic hit, I started an LLC so that I could branch outside of my school district and really be able to bring some of the offerings to other places around the world.
From my point of view, I've seen you explain to leadership how and why they need to value these things that are, first of all, just so inherent in the way you move through the world, but then also things that you have learned. So you have sort of presented this to existing leadership, and then through that, you have charted your own path into leadership. And it's been really cool to see, because it is a unique winding path to be standing where you have been and where you continue to stand. And so I'm just curious, was that an intentional, I'm going to access the leadership, or was it sort of an accidental, here I stand and here's the impact I'm having and I want to continue to make an impact?
Yeah, this is a great question. Remember that sort of junction that I was explaining of leaving the art room and moving into the yoga world and mindfulness-based strategies for teachers? At that time, I started doing a lot of traveling and speaking all over. And I was going to school districts and doing kind of like one-off things. And throughout that process, I started realizing, like, is it really having any impact whatsoever if I'm just doing a one and done? So I can provide a great experience for your professional development day, and then you're left to your own devices and your systems and the things that like kind of can build or, deteriorate a human being in the way that you have things structured. And whether that's in leadership or just the work day or the workload or the caseload, et cetera, the things that we manage in education. And so the pointed decision, to answer your question through the scenic route, the pointed decision was, I want to dig deep into the root system of where I'm planted. And it's very, very clear that anywhere, I'd probably venture to say anywhere, but especially in education, deciding factors live in positions of power. So by that, I mean, leaders hold a lot of power in the culture and development of connection. They hold a lot of power in morale and belief in what we're doing for kids. And so I knew that if I could be in a space, if I was offered it was a both, right? It was a tango, right? I was like, if I'm offered the space to like, and the platform, and I took that opportunity, then I had the potential of creating some catalyst for change within the leaders themselves. So it was a pretty pointed decision to think, like, how can I infiltrate the root system and nourish it? How can I be a part of the process that really nourishes the ground upon which we like harvest all of our kids' experiences here?
So you and I both function in the yoga world and in the youth world in different ways. And I really admire what you just said so much. And it gave me goosebumps, because I see a lot of yoga practitioners and instructors and educators going to sort of just the masses, the teachers. And it appears that just becomes one more thing that teachers need to do to, quote, improve the school environment, is take care of themselves, which totally, as individuals, they should take care of themselves for them. But I really love what you said about getting into the roots of the system, because it really does come from those in at the top of the framework of the staff. And I love that it kind of puts the onus on the leaders. My reflection is, I'm curious if this seems to resonate with you, is really that could apply to any organization. That so much of the burden of improving things tends to often fall on the people doing the day-to-day work, the forward-facing work. And sometimes, especially with personal development or professional development, a lot of times it's like, okay, yeah, staff, go to that. And the leaders use that time to do something else. But really, the leaders need it maybe more than anybody.
Yeah. So an organization is structured in one of two ways in my mind. And that is a ladder or a circle. And so what happens on the ladder is that, well, hierarchy. And what happens on the ladder are a couple of things. So people climb it with fervor. They climb it and they want to perform and achieve and strive. There's a lot of striving. People become desperate on the ladder. And when in desperation, they cling to it. And so let's say you're holding on to kind of where you align in this organization. What is really scary about that particular key role or person clinging is that they'll kick anything below them. Mm-hmm. So they're holding on so tight. They just want to hang on, and it does not matter what falls beneath them. And that's really, really tragic for an organization. Then at the very tippity top, you've got a different, right? Like there's a different air quality, there's a different vantage point, there's a different everything. Yeah. And that can really disconnect between the people on the ground, quite literally the people on the ground who are getting to school every day at 7 a.m., staying until 4:30, and the people in sort of the cruising altitude, right? And so that ladder, there's a ladder, and then the circle, it establishes a place of equity. It establishes a place where you link arms and where you can, in a moment, this is my strength and I'm going to step forward. And then this is a moment where this is my weakness. I'm going to step back. And in that, we can complement each other. And so really, when I'm working as a culture coach, which I didn't really answer in the first question because I got a few things on the plate, James. So, but when I'm working as a culture coach, that's what I'm assessing. Like, are we on a ladder? Or are we in a circle? Where are we in our optimal functioning state? Like, are we able to really work among each other's weaknesses and strengths? Or are we working in a way where we need to like smooth some of those transitions? Because some people overwork and they're stepping into the circle too often, and other people lay back a little too often. So it's just, there's so many nuances to the connections within how an organization is structured. But I have really seen, I guess there might be a third option, and that is just total disconnect or fragmentation. But I think in general, those are kind of the two operating systems that I'm working with and trying to help heal.
So in this work that you've been doing, what are some of the things that you have seen when the leadership does embrace this learning and this healing and this mindset? I guess, like, what is the result of this type of work?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, it's beyond a mission statement and a vision statement, right? It is embodied in how you work. And so a couple of concrete examples of that are, and I will say, I'm going to give Google the kudos and all the credit for this, because I learned this from Google. And that is, and there are several organizations doing this, but inserting some kind of purposeful pause or some kind of integrating a very intentional practice in the rote, in the regular routines. So you are actually taking time. So in the time that I was really focused on leadership development, every meeting started with a pause. So instead of hitting the ground running and running right into it, you actually start by getting like ground into being here, take away the distractions necessary to be present for this meeting. Assess. First competency of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Assess how we are right now. How are you right now? And then there's this actually comes from adaptive schools, and that's another resource we can share. But adaptive schools tells you about like kind of getting grounded in norms and working together, but then an inclusion so that you're connecting to the human before you're connecting to the work. And so some of those things are really critical when you're creating a circular organization style where we're going to be willing to take risks and know that there's going to be productive struggle in that process. And there's going to be elements where we're going to step into places that are of deep discomfort, but it's psychologically safe enough to do that because we know that fundamentally we share values and we are valued. So we're valued humans beyond the resume. So where I've really seen it work, and I'll tell a quick story just as kind of, because I'll never forget this. And he's moved on and he's like living in a different state altogether. And I'm not even sure if he's still in education, but we started at the beginning of leadership meetings. And that would be when building leaders all the way to district leaders, we would gather and have I think it was called a mindful moment. So we had some kind of like small structure built into the agenda that was about that grounding and becoming mindful. And that's a key element of mindful leadership. And so for about a year and a half to 2 years, I was leading that. And I was generating the content. I would kind of listen and learn on the ground what's happening in schools, and then produce something that was relevant. And, or the superintendent would just ask me, like, this is what's happening. This is what I need you to, like, we need to talk about compassion here, or something like that. After a while, there were enough people that I had coached who were indicating interest in leading that portion.
Goosebumps.
So then you had leaders stepping up and into the space of like telling, like sometimes it's just storytelling. And the gentleman that I'm thinking of stood up and he told a story about his grandmother and his grandmother, his abuela. And he told this really heartfelt story that brought us all into the space of his memory. And so it was a gentle ushering, it was like his memory of her light, of her words, of her presence. And I mean, think of that. If you just pause for a second and think about like a board, like a conference room full of kind of like people in dressy attire, and you're entering a living room and a memory of a grandmother. I mean, that's a very intimate memory. And that was our mindfulness practice that day, right? And so I think that piece of centering the humanity in the process is where you see it really unfold in many, many ways that are very, very beneficial to a team and to functioning. Because ultimately then, think of any challenge that you have, you're not dealing with just the challenge and the structures that surround the challenge. You're dealing first with the person. And that's a totally different skill set.
That is beautiful. Yeah, I'm like still having little waves of goosebumps from that story. So that makes total sense.
Those are all good signs, Jamie. All good signs.
Yeah. So you have worked both inside and outside the world of public school.
Yeah.
As a staff person, as a leader, you probably, I would imagine, have a different level of autonomy of what you bring in outside of a public school system versus inside of a public school system. And I would imagine a different level of advocacy for what you're bringing in those settings as well. Maybe I'm wrong, but that would be my guess, is that you have to navigate that autonomy that you have as a provider, as a leader in those settings, based on the framework of, I'm going to say, bureaucracy, for lack of a better word.
One of my roles is in conflict resolution. And so when you're thinking about culture coaching, a lot of times there's conflict. I think of it as like, it's not always safe drinking water, and so whatever that filtration process is, I am coming in a lot of times to help repair. And in the repair and restoration of a situation, when I think of autonomy, I think like, I know my role here is to be the middle space, to hold what is most important to both parties, and to bring them into a place where they can maybe not shake hands, but they can look at each other eye to eye, And where that crosses over with advocacy, as you mentioned, is we always want to do what's right by kids, what's good for kids, what's right for kids, what's right by kids. And there's so much that gets in the way of that. And sometimes it's a shortage. It's a shortage of resource. It's a shortage of help. It's a shortage of transportation. And we have to solve the problem together. But because there are strong feelings, because a child might need an advocate, there can be a time where that tension just rises to a boiling point. As I'm sitting here, I'm sort of filtering through a number of different examples I can think of where, whether it's negotiating with parents of students or administrators and parents and teachers, and being able to, part of my role is to go and just listen. So I listen deeply for their perspective and learn deeply about their perspective, in that holding my own, right? Holding my own space in that autonomy and the separation from it, because I can't become a part of this problem, because I have to hold the space for it and through it. And so oh man, there's so many examples, but I was doing work in an outside district, and there was like what can happen. I think so many people listening might be like, oh yes, totally. Like it's one toxic person who then just is venting, and then that toxicity breeds. And then so-and-so is really uncomfortable with the toxicity and the nature of conversations and where they're going. And so then that breeds. And then the next thing you know, like nobody's getting along and nobody can walk into the staff room and like, everybody's out at 3:01. And it's problematic because we need children can feel something a mile away. You don't ever have to open your mouth for them to know if they like you or if you like them or not. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if you have an unhappy teacher or someone who's unhappy at school or an administrator who's not getting along with so-and-so, like these are really critical things that have to be paid attention to. So I just spent a whole summer a few years ago going in and meeting with small groups, meeting with individuals, sometimes on Zoom, sometimes in person, and just listening deeply. And summarizing, paraphrasing, like making sure, clarifying. And that's a part of listening is the clarification so that you're on the same road together, but then bringing them together to a space where I can then say, okay, I should pause and say in that process, sometimes I listen and say, we're not able, this is not something we're able to do, right? I would suggest X, Y, Z, and it's a different road than restoration or resolution. But oftentimes it is coming together and really being able to be net neutral. Yeah, being totally neutral and being able to honor the perspective from which they're coming with the hope that they can share and connect to that other perspective so that we can meet in the middle space. The place where that becomes a tense point at times is that is not something easily packageable. This is not a quote unquote normal job, especially in schools,
right, yeah.
Right, so people are kind of like, wow, what is a, SEL coordinator or what does a restorative justice person do? Or, gosh, I could talk for hours about it, but really I reconnect the broken wires. And so there's some place there where I have to advocate for the continuation because I can see the deeper, bigger purpose. It's just the uniqueness of it pulls a little bit of tension sometimes for people who are onlookers and have limited information. It's usually the less you know, the more you make up, right? So they just don't have a deep understanding of that. So
it's interesting because I feel like the message that kids needed these things has been sort of in the ether for now a little bit of time. But the idea that schools need them as structures and the team needs it and the leadership needs it is a little bit more of a trailblazing path that you're on. And so it's really beautiful to hear that these tender moments of reconnecting the wires are able to happen in schools when resources are sometimes very limited. And while I work with schools, I'm not in the school I might be in a school building for my programs, but I'm not in the school system. And so it's sort of from the outside, the function of it is a little cloaked, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to hear kind of that these deeper, richer conversations are happening. And so major kudos to you. And also, I just have to imagine that the advocacy for the movement is a lot of the work.
Yeah.
So that's just, it's interesting to hear about that. So if you were going to give, let's say we have a leader of an organization that's listening to this podcast or of a school, and they're like, okay, I think this is something that I want for my organization. If you could give them an elevator speech about why this, like why, so that they could feel empowered to advocate for it themselves.
Right.
What would that be?
Yeah. So again, this is a little tricky and it's going to take the scenic route. And that is, so I have a lot of times people call me and say, I think I want this. And so then I actually come back with a question. So it's not a one size fits all, like, here's what you're going to get if you invest this. It's more so like, so right now we're working with a district that is in a massive downsizing. They're moving from several schools to several fewer schools. And that's probably all I can say about that. So Rise for the Greater Good is a consulting team. I work with two brilliant humans, Katrina Creek and Laura Love. Laura, a lot of secondary experience and just an incredible leader, very grounded in practice. She's a social and racial justice activist, and as is Katrina. Katrina's background, though, is elementary and social work. And so we come together, and we came to this school district and said, we can help you. Like, this is a big undertaking to merge schools, to bring together families, to bring together cultures. This is going to take more than just your everyday capacity. This is going to take a lot, and we can coach you through that. And so at first, he wanted the elevator speech. Well, like, kind of what are our outcomes 3 years from now? And it's like, this is Jamie, I don't know. It harkens back a little bit to the question of, like, if I start meditating, how quickly am I going to change? Right? Like, when am I going to see the benefits? And like, when am I going to be more patient? And I go to a 3-step model that I really need to find the resource for, because I think of it fairly frequently. And that is like interest, benefit, discipline. So this leader has come to me and said, I think I want this for my organization. Usually that's driven by a need. The need that there's restructuring of the school district, there's toxicity in this work team. It can be as small as, like, I have 5 people who aren't getting along and we needed a mediator, to, like, we are massively restructuring huge communities and we need someone to think with us through that process. So there's quite a scale, which is why there's no one size fits all. But you have the interest, I'm interested in doing this. Then you start the work, and that's where the benefits start coming in. And so there's a parallel. This is true for meditation, yoga, jogging, right? Interest, benefit, you start to reap the benefits. And what happened was this organization had said, kind of like, well, what are our 3-year outcomes? I was like, I need to meet with you first. Like, I need to feel this team. I need to understand the idiosyncrasies of the team. You're going to say your one thing and you're going to act in a way that I'm going to see if there's alignment there. I need to get to know you way before I can tell you the outcomes. And so a lot of times I will ask, if somebody calls me and says, this is what I need, I'm going to just ask about that need. What is the interest? Where is that interest stemming from? What is the undercurrent that is driving this? Then we start working together. You experience the benefits. And the final piece of this whole kind of system I'm laying out here is then it's the discipline, or it's the consistency in showing up. So for a small team to a large team, you might be interested, and then you're going to experience the benefits of a deeper connected team, a highly functioning team versus you know what it feels like to drive with a flat tire. You pull over, And so the work, right? Like, I need a little bit more than an elevator speech. I need more like a flight to Chicago to be able to talk about it, right? And it's an airplane speech. It's getting at the heart of, like, well, what's your culture like? What's your community like? What is your core value? I will say something that might just interest you is, we do this value work, and a lot of people are like, blah, 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 like, like we've all done the values thing so often. Yeah. And I love to approach through a back door, where I'm not coming in and saying, like, hey, we're doing core values today, because everybody's like, sort of insert eye roll, just going to quick check my texts, And so it's really like, hey, what do you actually love most about leading? What do you look forward to the most? So answer that question, and you just jot. Okay, so what do I look forward to the most about leading? Gosh, I look forward to, for me, like this, giving you an example, like, I look forward to people having aha moments. So that's what I really love about leading is, okay, so aha moments, Okay, next question. Where do you spend your time preparing? What is it that you do to, like, in preparation? What is it? What are you spending a lot of time and investment of your time preparing? And then how is your calendar reflecting what's important to you? Like, what is in your calendar? And then the final question is, what do you take home? What are you thinking about after the day is done? And so you journal through all of those things. And as you journal through, aha moments, depth, meaning, those are the things that excite me about leading. How do I spend time preparing? I'm always about flow. I'm always about, like, I want it to feel good from the moment they walk in the room to the moment that they leave, they're feeling better. That I hope that this is true of the podcast if they stick with us. Like it's, I want the flow to feel like it's seamlessly curated.
Yeah.
And so flow is really important to me. And that ultimately means strategy, right? My calendar is, I was looking and doing this like, okay, well, how it's consistency. I've got this Monday meeting. I've got this Tuesday's check-in. I've got this Wednesday group. I've got this. And consistency is key for me. So it's because people will know they can show up, or that I will show up, and how I will show up. And so consistency for me is like a deeply rooted value. And then what do I take home? It's usually something about relationships. And so to me, that means what I'm valuing is connection. So after you kind of jot it all out, then you look for the themes, the bigger meaning, the bigger words around those 4 categories. And I have found that then all of a sudden we say, does your core value show up? And for me, my core value is connection. From the postal worker to the person serving me coffee to my teenage daughter, like I want to try to be in a space where they can sense connection. Connection has always been like, if somebody throws the core value exercise, it's going to be connection for me. But then also depth, strategy, and consistency are also what I'm about. Okay, right? Like I can rock with that. And it's a little bit, it's a little deeper. So it's a fun exercise to try. And it's a great one that you can do with small teams or whole staff groups or things like that. Yeah.
Thank you. That is really great. I'm going to jot that all out when I listen back to this. Good. So thank you for that.
You betcha.
So let's shift a little bit to thinking about you as a leader. So your work is super fascinating and has deep impact in the community, and then the ripples of that just go on and on. I know that you had a winding road, as you described it, to leadership. When you look back to you as a child, what parts of childhood Betsy are present in leader adult Betsy? And is this something that you always gravitated towards, or would this shock child Betsy that you're standing here today?
I think the only thing that would surprise my 7-year-old self is that I'm as comfortable as I am public speaking. I think I was a little on the shy side. I was really sensitive. And here's what I want to honor in this answer. And that is, in their own ways, my parents were both incredible leaders. My mom was mainly a focused mom. She worked in the home and took care of us. But she also was deeply committed to her faith and her biblical studies, right? So for my mom, that was it. That was where she really invested her emotional energy outside of the home. And she was a leader in that. In fact, I was recently at a funeral and saw someone, and he was like, yeah, and they're reminiscing of like our past and everything. Like I came upon some notes from a class I took of your mom's, and it struck me like, wow, you saved that class, like that. Oh, wow. First of all, you saved it. And second of all, thank you so much for mentioning it. I think probably she doesn't give herself nearly enough credit for the leader that she was. And that's in part because my dad is he's a mega, capital M mega. I mean, and dad, I say that in the most respectful way, but he's a 7 on the Enneagram like me. And he was so adventurous and he was such a risk taker, for better, for worse, in his career. And so I think at a young age, I just looked up to him as like this amplifier, right? And I looked up to him and saw him as, something I aspire to, but he also saw it in me. And I don't know if 7s love 7s. I always say that 7s do love 7s. So I don't know if it was that kindred connection or what, but he definitely, like, it was embedded in me that I had the power and potential to be a leader at a very young age. And then fast forward, I would say in high school, I had this great opportunity to go, with my high school friends, my boyfriend, to a summer camp. And within a few weeks, all the college kids got kicked out because I think they were smoking weed in the art room, or something crazy. And I stepped in, and that is a moment, it's a pivot for me for sure, because I was kind of a helper, like assistant in the art lodge girl. And all of a sudden all the college kids were fired. And so I remember closing down the lodge and like painting the stools and reorganizing supplies. And then like, I kind of reopened it like bedazzled, like, and I was like, I don't know, 16 or 17,
So you.
And,
okay.
But at the end of the summer, the camp director he spoke some like powerful words into my leadership in that experience. And so like looking back, I'm a great co-pilot. That's what I want to be. I don't actually want to be prez, I want to be on the side, and I want to be like sort of like gently nudging sometimes. Hey, the nudge is sometimes pretty hard shove when it comes to, especially when it comes to human rights and where that can be lacking in systems. But I will, like, I love sitting and just coaching someone to amplify what they're capable of. And I think that has always been true of me since a child.
Well, I have to say that the sevens love sevens line, I haven't heard that before, but my son, who because he was one of your art students, is also a 7. Yes. And you, obviously we didn't know this when he was in elementary school that he was a 7, but I remember so distinctly, I want to say aloud, but almost encouraged his under the table puppy sounds when his puppy art project was done. And you just let him be the 7 that he was, of just like the playful, joyful, joy-seeking child that he was, in between his other many emotions that he had as a younger kid. And so thank you for loving the 7 in my family. And also, very cool to hear how you had people, you said, spoke into existence, or I can't remember exactly the words you used, about really let you know that they saw leadership in you from a young age. And so, it's no surprise that from a mega and a leader and a teacher and a camp director that you were encouraged by them to get to be where you are. And what's so interesting is that through all these episodes on this podcast, the number of people that got their most encouraging leadership pivot from summer camp is just mind-boggling. So I just had to mention that. Yeah. It's been really, really, really interesting.
Go Des Moines YMCA camp. Woo.
We'll give them a tag.
That's right. Little shout out.
Totally. We'll link them in the show notes. Okay. So I have some just more rapid fire questions for you, if that's okay.
I'm so down for it. The rapid fire ones are always like, I want to negotiate and take the scenic route. And they're like, no, this is lightning, fast, sister. I'm like, okay. I'm ready for it, Jane.
Okay. All right. Is there a tool or strategy that you use for staying organized through all of these juggling acts that you do in your many areas of work?
This is a little humbling, but yes, I on the Thursday, like it feels real late if I'm getting to late Thursday, which is where we are right now in the world. But on the Thursday prior to the week, I plan the entire week out. And so I get into a place where I meal plan, I workout plan, I yoga plan, I plan my meetings, and then look for spaces within that where I'm going to have like my recharge. So I also plan for that. So it's not just planning everything, start to finish, chock-a-block full, but it's looking at, okay, if you're going to push the gas pedal a little hard this day, where are you going to pull back? And so I go paper planner first, and I have color coded, and then I put it in a Google Calendar. So I kind of I'm very 1996 about that, but.
Love it. Very cool. So I know that this question will probably be on the verge of not so rapid fire because you are a learner. I know this about you. Are there go-to podcasts or books or other resources that you go to nourish your leadership side?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, everybody just answered quietly, Brene Brown, yeah. I think Dare to Lead and anything to do with when I need that, that just gust of wind in my sails. I will also put a deep plug in for Elena Aguilar. Elena Aguilar's got an incredible team called the Bright Morning Team, and it is just really nourishing for school leadership, but all in general leaders. And Maria Dislin is a principal in the Madison area who is on that team. So there's it's sort of the Kevin Bacon game. Yeah. So Elena Aguilar, she's got a great book called Onward. Shane Safira's got Listening Leader. That's a book that I crack open fairly frequently. And, I think I'm going to throw out Rich Roll, even though it's not like there's so many things that Rich Roll covers. When I really need help with focus or determination or deepening the experience of leadership, I listen to a Rich Roll podcast.
Love it. Love it. Okay. I'm going to put a twist on this typical question that I ask at the end of each episode for you, because you are a very well-recognized person in the Madison area because of the work that you do in leadership, and also because of your many, many years of teaching children. I'm sure you go nowhere without being recognized. If you had a day off of work and of accomplishing anything in life, like no tasks, no to-do list, no nothing, and you were going to spend that in Madison, and I'm going to add in the asterisks for you that you would also be anonymous. So you don't have to worry about being anything other than what you need in that moment. What is one activity that you would do to spend this day off, and one place that you would go to get something to eat?
Okay. I'm going to go to Karen Rigsby's class at Inner Fire.
Okay.
And I am going to go to Sardine for mussels and something delicious to drink by the lake.
That is an excellent choice. You have reminded me that I've not been there in a while. Betsy, thank you so much for sharing all of your brilliance and your energy and your joy and your flow. Is there anything else that you want listeners to know before we start to wrap up about the work that you're doing in the world these days?
I think there's not so much about the work I'm doing. I think it's more the work they're doing. Like if you've made it this far in the podcast, you're clearly doing something that's having an impact, and you're doing legacy work. So know deeply that you're connected to the heart of your legacy. And with that comes an incredible responsibility. So with the responsibility, it's not to feel pressure. It's to feel like the savoring of what you've been called into and the life that you're living. So feel your aliveness. People can feel that around you. And ultimately, that's going to have the biggest impact on how you lead, is how you make people feel.
That's beautiful. Betsy, where can listeners find you or reach you if they want to reach out and get in touch?
Yeah, so my website and all information about me is on Instagram at By Firelight.
Thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back next time with another inspiring episode with another leader. Follow the Leaders is produced by Lit Path Studios, and music is by Shane Ivers. You can hear more about this show and all the other podcasts at Lit Path Studios by going to www.litpathstudios.com.